In this lecture, we're going to create our first translation. Currently, every component is outputting regular text to the user. It's completely static. The library won't be able to magically replace that text with our translations. We need to write the translations the application will use. After we've written the translations, we need to tell Vue where to load the translations. For this course, we won't be translating every single piece of text because it would be too time-consuming. I'll only be translating bits and pieces to demonstrate how the library works. Let's create our first translation. Open the Home component file. In the template, we have a section called Introduction placed at the very top. There's a comment above it that says Introduction heading. For our first translation, we will copy the text in the heading. Next, open the English.json file. Inside the object, the property name must represent the path to the translation. In our app, we can reference a specific translation by its path. Our first translation will have a path of listen. The value for this property can be the translation itself. Let's paste the translation. We've created our first translation. Fantastic! I want to take this a step further. Personally, I prefer to organize my translations by component. This makes it easier to find where a message is used in the application. Vue i18n allows us to organize our translations into nested objects. Let's wrap the listen property with an object called home. I recommend organizing by the component the translation is used in. We're storing the translation in an object called home because the translation will be used in the home component file. Any messages that will be related to the home component will be stored in this object. It's not necessary to organize translations like this. Translations are available to all components. Organizing by object makes it easier to find translations used in specific components. We've created our first translation. The next step is to create another locale file. This way, we can test switching between languages. Feel free to work with any language you'd like. We're going to create a French language file. Inside the source/locales directory, create a file called fr.json. Once again, we're using the locale as the file's name. Next, open the i18n.js file. At the top of the file, import the French JSON file. Add it to the messages object. We can start adding the translations for the French language. There's one thing to keep in mind during this entire process. All language files must have the same paths. For example, in the English file, we have a path called home.listen. Therefore, the French file must have a path called home.listen. During the translation process, the Vue i18n package will search for translations with similar paths. Let's say a component is rendering the text in the home.listen path from the English file. If the user switches to French, it'll search for the same path in the French file. Otherwise, it will be unable to translate the text into the proper language. Let's copy the object from the English file to the French file. We can begin to update the messages to French. It doesn't make much sense if the translations are exactly the same. Using Google Translate, I'm going to translate this into its French counterpart. Before moving on, I want to add a disclaimer. Google Translate comes with an API for translating your content, but it is a paid service. It's a quick and easy way to translate your content, but not completely reliable. I highly recommend hiring a professional translator for translating your application into the desired language. Alright, so we're finished with creating our translations. The introduction heading message is now translated in English and French. The next step is to use the translations in the application. The messages are available to all components because we registered them in the Vue instance. This registration will take care of injecting the messages into our components. Let's try loading the listen translation in the home component. Switch back to the home component file. Search for the heading tags in the introduction section. Replace the inner text with an expression that calls the $T function. The $T function is defined by the i18n plugin. It becomes available to our whole application after we've registered the library as a plugin. It has one argument, which is the path to the message. In our case, it would be home.listen. The plugin will be able to resolve this into the proper message. We're done. Let's view the application in the browser. If we did everything right, we would see the message outputted like it was before. But how do we truly know if the message is coming from the locale file? We can go back to the i18n file and change the default locale to French. Update the locale property in the create i18n function to FR. After making those changes, we'll go back to the browser to see what we get. As expected, the French translation will get outputted instead. By changing a single value, we can switch between languages easily. We don't have to worry about creating a solution ourselves because the i18n plugin will handle it for us. That's fantastic. After the initial setup, we can focus solely on translating the strings. There are some scenarios I would like to go over. We'll cover those in the upcoming lectures. We've learned how to translate the app. Overall, it's a simple process. It's a great feature to add unless you plan on serving an audience who speaks one language. Before ending this lecture, I'm going to undo the locale change we made to the i18n.js file. We're going to continue working with English translations.